Jon Jones. Jonathan Dwight Jones, born July 19, 1987, is an American professional mixed martial artist currently signed to the Ultimate Fighting Championship (UFC), in which he has competed in the light heavyweight division. He is a former two-time UFC light heavyweight champion, holding the title from March 2011 to April 2015 and from December 2018 to August 2020. Jones also held the interim UFC light heavyweight championship in 2016. As of February 14, 2023, he is in the UFC men's pound-for-pound rankings American mixed martial artist born 1987 for other people with the same name. See Jon Jones. Disambigation. Jones became the youngest champion in UFC history with his title victory over Mauricio Rua at age 23. He holds many UFC records in the light heavyweight division, including the most title defenses, most wins, and longest win streak. During much of his championship reign, Jones has been widely considered to be the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world. Never stopped nor outscored during his career, Jones's only professional loss is a controversial disqualification against Matt Hamill, a result that Hamill and UFC President Dana White dispute between 2015 and 2017. Jones was involved in several controversies and lost his title 3 times as a result of disciplinary action. He was first stripped of his title and removed from the official rankings by the UFC in 2015 after he was arrested on felony hit-and-run charges. His subsequent returns to the UFC in 2016 and 2017 saw him emerge victorious in title bouts against Ovince St. Preux and Daniel Cormier, but were both cut short by Jones testing positive for banned substances and receiving further suspensions, with the latter reversed to a no contest. After his 2017 suspension was lifted, Jones reclaimed the championship in 2018 by defeating Alexander Gustafsson. He voluntarily vacated the title in 2020 amid a pay dispute with White and cited intent to move up to heavyweight. Training. Jon Jones, kicking a punching bag in training gyms, has trained with Team Bomb Squad out of Cortland, New York, then briefly with the TriStar Gym in Montreal, Canada, and most recently at Jackson's MMA in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He also trained as a powerlifter during his suspension from the UFC. Fighting style. Jon Jones, posing with Marines at Camp Pendleton in Jones, stands out by his high adaptability and flawless technique in the cage and has been described as one of the most dynamic, innovative, and constantly evolving fighters in the history of MMA and perhaps the greatest martial artist ever to step into an octagon. Jones capitalizes on his great range and defensive wrestling to land blows in a creative, unorthodox style, employs a diverse kicking technique, favoring front kicks to the body and head, roundhouse kicks to the legs and upper body, and his most known technique, the oblique kick, a controversial move that targets his opponent's knee. The oblique kick was a technique popularized by Bruce Lee, who Jones cited as an inspiration. Jones also excels in the clinch, where he is skilled at controlling his opponent's arms and scoring elbow and knee strikes. On the ground, he has excellent positional control and an ability to find openings for punches and elbow strikes. Personal life. Jones and his fiancée Jessie have 3 daughters: Leah, born in 2008, Carmen Nicole Jones, born in 2009, and Olivia Haven, born in 2013. In an interview with Joe Rogan on December 1, 2016, Jones stated that he has 4 daughters aged 9, 8, 6, and 3, indicating the daughter born before Leah. On February 23, 2022, Jones announced via Twitter that his fiancée had left him around 2 months prior. Jones as a Christian. Jones claimed that he was sexually assaulted as a child. Jones with Lorenzo Fertitta and Glover Teixeira at a U.S. Senate event in March 19, 2011. Jones was en route to Great Falls Historic Park in Paterson, New Jersey, where he planned to meditate several hours ahead of his fight against Mauricio Shogun Rua at UFC 128. He was accompanied by his coaches Mike Winkeljohn and Greg Jackson. As their driver prepared to drop them off, Jones observed an elderly couple screaming for help. The woman informed Winkeljohn that a man had smashed her car window and had run off with her GPS. Jones, along with his 2 coaches, chased after the robber, caught and tripped him and held him down until the police arrived on August 8, 2012. Jones became the first mixed martial artist to be sponsored by Nike on an international scale. He is also the first MMA fighter to have his own shoe line and the first MMA fighter to represent Gatorade and Muskletech in the octagon. On December 16, 2014, Jones announced that he had signed a sponsorship deal with Reebok. However, on April 29, 2015, Reebok terminated their sponsorship following Jones's involvement in a hit-and-run incident. A day later, Jones also lost his sponsorship with Muskletech. Jones has been criticized for repeatedly poking his opponents in the eyes. In response to the criticism, Jones released a video on Instagram in April 2014 in which he mocked fans by simulating crying and saying Jones put his finger in his eye. Dirtiest fighter in MMA. After backlash towards the post, Jones deleted it from his account when asked about the controversy. UFC President Dana White stated, "We've got to stop that stuff. The openings of the hands and putting the hands on the face are something bad, but it happens with guys who have reach. They do that a lot." White clarified his position in another interview, saying, "It's not just taller fighters. Jones has that range and he can do it. But lots of guys do it because that's how you block punches. So you keep your hands open and you slap punches down. Then guys are rushing in and you're doing whatever, and guys get poked in the eyes." White also noted that in the fight against Glover Teixeira, after Jones was warned about the behavior, he was more careful to avoid any eye pokes throughout the rest of the match, a move he claimed Jones would not credited for from detractors. Jones later said in an interview, "I realize that I do it. I realize the criticism that I got from it. It's not on purpose. If you watch my fights, it's me extending my arm in a reactionary way. I do put a hand on people's foreheads to maintain distance. That's what you saw Teixeira, but to say I am purposely poking people in the eye, it's just inaccurate." During a promotional event for UFC 178 on August 4, 2014, Jones and Daniel Cormier briefly scuffled during an onstage stare-down, initiated by Jones pressing his forehead against Cormier's forehead, prompting Cormier to shove Jones by the throat, to which Jones responded by throwing a punch. Both fighters were restrained by coaches and event organizers. UFC Chief Legal Officer Kirk Hendrick said there are going to be ramifications. In addition, the Nevada State Athletic Commission requested a video copy of the altercation. On September 23, 2014, Jones was fined $50,000 and was ordered to undergo 40 hours of community service by the Nevada Athletic Commission. During the disciplinary hearing, Jones claimed to have lost a six-figure endorsement deal with Nike, but later admitted to fabricating the statement. In April 27, 2015, Albuquerque, New Mexico police stated that Jones was sought in connection with a hit-and-run early the previous morning. Jones was alleged to have run a red light and crashed his rental car in a collision involving two other vehicles. Jones allegedly fled the scene of the crash on foot, leaving an injured pregnant woman behind in another vehicle. The incident was witnessed by an off-duty police officer who identified the suspect as an African-American man wearing a white shirt and dark pants, whom he believed to be Jones. According to witnesses, the man described as Jones then returned to the scene to grab cash from the vehicle before fleeing again. Paperwork found in the rental car was under the name of Jonathan Jones. Inside the silver Buick SUV, law enforcement found a pipe with marijuana inside of it. Though initially wanted for questioning that could have resulted in a simple misdemeanor, Jones's charges were elevated to a felony on April 27 for injuring a person and purposely leaving the scene of an accident. An arrest warrant was issued against Jones, and surrender arrangements were made between law enforcement and Jones's lawyers. That evening, Jones turned himself into the Albuquerque Police Department. Later that evening, he posted bail of $2,500 and left the Bernalillo County Metro Detention Center. He made a court appearance on April 28 and did not enter a plea. The judge lifted any travel restrictions, and Jones was allowed to remain free as long as he remained in contact with his lawyer and followed certain conditions. With a pending UFC fight still in his contract, UFC President Dana White and Zuffa owner Lorenzo Fertitta traveled to New Mexico from Las Vegas to meet with Jones in person. That same day, the UFC stripped Jones of the title, removed him from official rankings, and suspended him indefinitely. In a statement released that day, the UFC announced that Jones was stripped from his belt for violating the Athlete Code of Conduct policy. Jones apologized to his fans on Twitter by saying, "Got a lot of soul searching to do. Sorry to everyone I've let down." On September 29, 2015, he pleaded guilty to leaving the scene of an accident and was subsequently sentenced to up to 18 months of supervised probation. He was authorized to travel for work-related purposes. Jones met all of the conditions, which included 72 separate appearances for charity or youth outreach, avoiding a felony charge on his criminal record. In an interview in December 2016, Jones admitted he had run from the scene of the accident and had not checked on the occupant of the other vehicle. Jones' September 2021 mug showed in the early hours of September 24, 2021, a day after Jones was inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame for his fight with Alexander Gustafsson at UFC 165. Police were called to the Caesars Palace Resort Hotel in Las Vegas, Nevada, responding to a domestic incident. According to a police report obtained by news site MMA Fighting, a 911 call was made by a hotel security guard when Jones' youngest daughter requested help, claiming there was a domestic incident between Jones and his fiancée, Jessie Moses. Cops arrived in minutes, cutting Jones off as he was attempting to flee the scene. Officers detained Jones and began to investigate the situation. While officers detained Jones, others went to the room to further investigate and get Moses' side of the story. When they arrived to the room, they observed her with blood on her face and clothing and with a bump on her lip, consistent with someone who had been struck. Moses stated that Jones had left the hotel to go out with friends while Moses and their children went to sleep, and that when Jones returned, he was belligerent, became agitated, and pulled her hair. She claims that the hair pulling was the extent of the physicality between the two, and claimed that the blood on her face and clothing was from chapped lips. She also declined a temporary protective order against Jones. Police stated that while he was being detained, a belligerent Jones had butted the hood of the patrol vehicle, leaving a dent. They claimed Jones had made threats and challenged the arresting officers to a fight, and that Jones had said he could break free from the handcuffs. No attempts at a fight were followed through on, however, and Jones was placed under arrest peacefully after the investigation concluded. He was taken to the Clark County Jail, where he was charged with 1 count of domestic battery, a misdemeanor, and 1 count of tampering with a police vehicle, a felony. His bail was set at $16,000. Jones posted bail approximately 12 hours after his arrest and was due to be arraigned in court on October 26. 4 days after his arrest, Jones posted an Instagram video of himself lifting weights, with the caption saying, "I have way too much trauma to consume alcohol. My brain simply can't handle it anymore. I will leave alcohol in my past forever." 3 weeks after the arrest, Jones was banned from entering Jackson Wink MMA gym by his coach, Mike Winklejohn, where Jones had been training since 2009. On December 16, it was revealed that the domestic battery charge against Jones was dropped. As for the felony tampering with a police vehicle charge, Jones pleaded no contest and was ordered to pay $750 in restitution, attend anger management therapy, and was given a court order to stay out of any and all legal trouble. In the early morning of May 19, 2012, Jones drove his Bentley Continental GT into a pole in Binghamton, New York. Jones was arrested for driving under the influence and was bailed out by his mother. He pleaded guilty to DUI charges and was ordered to pay a $1,000 fine, install ignition interlocks on all of his vehicles, complete a victim's impact class, and had his driver's license suspended for 6 months. On July 21, 2019, it was reported that Jones had been charged with battery for an alleged incident in April 2019 involving a cocktail waitress at a strip club in Albuquerque. The waitress claimed that Jones slapped her, put her in a chokehold, and kissed her on the neck and touched her after she had asked him to stop. The bench trial of the case was held on September 26, 2019, where Jones pleaded no contest to the charges and received a 90-day deferred sentence whereby he must avoid arrest, not violate the law, consume no alcohol or drugs, and not return to the scene. He was also ordered to pay court fees during his unsupervised probation period. As per the court document, Jones was arrested in the early morning of March 26, 2020 in Albuquerque, New Mexico. According to police reports, an Albuquerque PD officer heard what sounded to be a gunshot and, upon further investigation, observed a black Jeep with Jones in the driver's seat. After noticing signs of intoxication, the responding officer administered a field sobriety test, which Jones failed. Jones was also given a breathalyzer test and registered a BAC more than twice the legal limit. Police then searched Jones' vehicle while arresting him for DWI and found a partially empty bottle of Recordo Mezcal as well as a black handgun underneath the driver's seat. Jones was arrested on the scene and taken to the Bernalillo County Jail. Altogether, Jones was charged with aggravated DWI, negligent use of a firearm, possession of an open container, and driving with no proof of insurance. On March 31, it was announced that Jones had pleaded guilty to the DWI charge. After accepting a plea deal in which the other charges would be dropped, he was sentenced to 4 days house arrest, 1 year of supervised probation, a minimum of 90 days of outpatient therapy, and he must complete 48 hours of community service. In January 6, 2015, it was announced that Jones failed a drug test prior to UFC 182. He tested positive for benzoylospinin, the primary metabolite of cocaine. Because benzoylospinin is not banned out of competition by the World Anti-Doping Agency, that NSAC could not halt Jones from participating during UFC 182. He was randomly tested on December 3, 2014, and results came back on December 23, 2014. A week after his first test, Jones was tested again. He passed the second test, which meant that the cocaine metabolite was out of his system before the fight. When the news was made public, Jones went into rehab for 1 night. He was fined $25,000 on January 17 for violating the UFC's Athlete Code of Conduct policy. On January 19, 2015, Jones was interviewed for the first time since the failed drug test and said, "I'm not a cocaine addict by any means, or not even a frequent user. I just made a really dumb decision and got caught with my pants down in this whole situation." Prior to his UFC 182 bout with Cormier, Jones's testosterone-to-testosterone T ratio was considered by some experts to be alarmingly low. Victor Conte, a former steroid distributor who founded and led the Bay Area Laboratory Cooperative BALCO, said of Jones's test, "These levels are highly suspicious for Jon Jones. In my opinion, this is the reason that sophisticated anti-doping officials do target testing. So based on what we see here, my opinion is Jon Jones should be on a very short leash and should be random tested here until they sort out why he has these anomalies." This resulted in several journalists imploring the NSAC to utilize CI or carbon isotope ratio testing on Jones's samples. Luckily, this is a situation where speculation could quickly be ended. Jon Jones' drug test samples still exist, and a simple carbon isotope ratio test could be conducted to find the result. Put simply, a CIR test would be able to determine if the testosterone in Jones' system was synthetic or natural, Brent Brookhouse of Bloody Elbow wrote. However, according to NSAC Executive Director Bob Bennett, Jones' test samples had already undergone CIR testing by the same WADA-accredited lab which had reported his T ratios, noting that all CIR results came back clean. Additionally, he said there were 3 different types of tests done during each of the random tests: urine, blood testing for human growth hormone, and a blood passport test. The only negative was testing positive for cocaine metabolites. Bennett said in July 8, 2016, a urine sample from Jones tested positive for 2 banned substances, clomiphene, an anti-estrogen substance, and letrozole, an aromatase inhibitor, prior to his scheduled championship bout with Cormier at UFC 200. The violation was from a sample collection on June 16, with subsequent testing of the B sample confirming the doping. Both drugs, which are on the World Anti-Doping Agency banned substances list, are described as hormone and metabolic modulators, which are not allowed to be used in or out of competition. As a result, Jones had to withdraw from the event and was replaced by former middleweight champion Anderson Silva. Throughout the ordeal, Jones maintained his innocence, claiming that he was the victim of a contaminated product that he believed to be Cialis, which was later independently obtained, tested, and found to be contaminated by the United States Anti-Doping Agency. On November 7, 2016, it was announced that Jones was issued a one-year suspension by USADA following his arbitration hearing, though the panel concluded that Jones did not take the banned substances intentionally and was not a drug cheat. On August 22, 2017, it was announced that Jones was flagged for a potential doping violation by USADA stemming from his test sample that was collected on July 28. One day before his rematch against Cormier at UFC 214, he tested positive for Chernobyl, an anabolic steroid, and was placed on a provisional suspension as a result of the positive drug test. On September 13, the CSAC announced that it had overturned the result of the fight with Cormier from a KO victory for Jones to a no contest after both Jones's and B samples tested positive for Chernobyl. Jones was also stripped of the title for a third time, and it was then returned to Cormier. Jones stated that he did not knowingly take any prohibited substances, with his team believing Jones consumed tainted substances. Jones potentially faced up to a 4-year suspension if found guilty, but on September 18 he was handed a 15-month suspension by USADA, retroactive to July 28, plus 3 months community service. 30 months were deducted from the 4-year suspension because Jones provided substantial assistance to USADA. Substantial assistance refers to an athlete informing an anti-doping agency about a doping violation by another athlete. USADA said it reduced the suspension by a further 3 months after a hearing with an independent arbitrator, Richard McLaren, on September 15. Travis Tygart, CEO of USADA, said in a statement, "The independent arbitrator found that Jon Jones was not intentionally cheating in this case, and while we thought 18 months was the appropriate sanction given the other circumstances of the case, we respect the arbitrator's decision and believe that justice was served. This case is another strong reminder that athletes need to be extremely cautious about the products and supplements they use to ensure they are free of prohibited substances." Jones became eligible to fight again on October 28, 2018, and was scheduled to fight against Alexander Gustafsson at UFC 232 in Las Vegas on December 29. However, after further inconsistencies arose with his drug test on December 23, he was not granted a license to compete in Nevada, so the event was moved to Los Angeles. In order to receive a license from CSAC, Jones had to enroll into the VADA Voluntary Anti-Doping Association testing program, thus making him the first UFC fighter to be signed to both USADA and VADA testing programs simultaneously. Drug tests administered at UFC 232 found an ultra-trace amount of Chernobyl, which doctors attributed to a long-term pulsing effect of the metabolite detected in 2017. CSAC did not take disciplinary action against Jones, as the medical experts stated that there was no evidence that Jones had re-administered a banned substance and no performance-enhancing benefits were gained. Championships and accomplishments. Jon Jones with fans at UFC 100 Fan Expo, Mandalay Bay Casino, Las Vegas. Ultimate Fighting Championship of Light Heavyweight Championship 2 times 11 successful title defenses overall, 8 successful title defenses first reign, 3 successful title defenses second reign, longest light heavyweight champion reign in UFC history 15, a 1 days interim UFC light heavyweight championship 1 time longest unbeaten streak in UFC history 18 most consecutive wins in the UFC light heavyweight division 13 most consecutive title defenses in the UFC light heavyweight division 8 most successful title defenses in the UFC light heavyweight division 11 tied for most successful title defenses in UFC history 11 W. Demetrios Johnson most wins in UFC title fights 14 most UFC light heavyweight title fights 15 most wins in UFC light heavyweight title fights 14 most wins in UFC light heavyweight division 20 most decision wins in UFC light heavyweight division 10 longest total fight time in UFC light heavyweight division history most significant strike strikes landed in UFC light heavyweight division history 1463. Most total strikes landed in UFC light heavyweight division history 1835. Highest takedown defense percentage in UFC light heavyweight division history or percentage. Fourth most consecutive title defenses in UFC history. 8th youngest fighter to win a UFC championship 23 years. 242 days. Fight of the night 4 times versus Quinton Jackson, Lyoto Machida, Alexander Gustafsson, and Daniel Cormier. Knockout of the night 1 time versus Brandon Ver. Submission of the night 2 times versus Ryan Bader and Vitor Belfort. Performance of the night 1 time versus Daniel Cormier. Hall of Fame Fight Wing versus Alexander Gustafsson at UFC. United States Kickboxing Association ISPA Light Heavyweight Championship 1 time. Shirted Breakthrough Fighter of the Year All Violence, First Team All Violence, First Team Beatdown of the Year for win over Morchiero. Fighter of the Year All Violence, First Team All Violence, First Team Fight of the Year versus Alexander Gustafsson. UFC 165 Mixed Martial Arts Hall of Fame World MMA Awards. Breakthrough Fighter of the Year, Fighter of the Year, Fighter of the Year, Fight of the Year versus Alexander Gustafsson at UFC. Or Combat Persicum Biggest Story of the Year, Jon Jones and the Move of UFC 232 MMA Fighting Fight of the Year versus Alexander Gustafsson. UFC 165 Main Internet Fight of the Year versus Alexander Gustafsson. UFC 165 Fox Sportsicum Fight of the Year versus Alexander Gustafsson. UFC 165 Yahoo Sports Fight of the Year versus Alexander Gustafsson. UFC 165 Maui Clicum Fight of the Year versus Alexander Gustafsson. UFC 165 2018 Comeback Fighter of the Year Majanticum Fight of the Year versus Alexander Gustafsson. UFC 165 2015 January Fight of the Month versus Daniel Cormier. Fighter of the Year Fight of the Year versus Alexander Gustafsson. UFC 165 Wrestling Observer Newsletter Feud of the Year versus Daniel Cormier. Most Outstanding Fighter Spike Guys Choice Awards Most Dangerous Man Fight Magazine Newcomer of the Year National Junior College Athletic Association of a 197-pound National Championship out of Iowa Central Community College 2006 NJCAA All-American out of Iowa Central Community College 2006 National High School Coaches Association's Senior All-American 2005 New York State Public High School Athletic Associationists a Division I State Championship out of Union Endicott High School 2005 USA Wrestling Nerfus Junior Greco-Roman Regional Championship 2004 Mixed Martial Arts Record Source Grappling Record Pay-per-view bouts